I loved college, but my first few weeks of my first year were especially challenging because I had a roommate who was highly disrespectful. A junior in my dorm who learned of my situation offered to give up his single so that we could room together. He said, "You'll get out of your situation, and I can be a Christian witness to you." Okay. Now, once we were living together, I felt obliged to go to the Friday night gatherings of the InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. I liked the singing, the warmth of community, the ethic of caring for one another. The prayers seemed a little silly, but I liked it. A friend of mine I had invited told me he was getting harassed for not showing up regularly. I said, "You gotta be kidding." And then late in the year, we were walking down the dorm hallway when a different leader of the InterVarsity Christian Fellowship approached us and said, "You guys signed up for the end of the year retreat?" I said, "I am." But Mike said, "Nope, parents have plans for me, family vacation." "Well, Mike," the leader responded, "you have a big decision to make. To follow your parents or follow God." Mike just looked at me and said, "See?" Now, I went on this retreat on Catalina Island, a site accessible only by boat. It felt like there was no leaving. And we were taught how to evangelize. And I thought to myself, oh, this poor town, they didn't even see us coming. And then during a training session, or a large group session, a leader proclaimed, "If you're a Christian at the Claremont colleges, it is your duty to participate in the activities of InterVarsity and set aside all others that get in the way of doing God's work." I erupted into tears. And afterwards, they could not get me to stop crying. I said, "I can't be a part of this." I wept, knowing that I was losing this community and these people as friends because I could not assent to the presumption of knowing God's will for other people. Now, just a week and a half later, I was up in Mendocino County, beginning an internship in a residential home. Actually, it felt like a summer camp. There were 4 homes for abused children in residential treatment. And these children had horrific histories, had failed out of multiple foster placements, and was a step down from the state hospital. So sometimes a number of these children needed to be physically restrained. It was hard work. Now, some of those counselors had such compassion and inner strength that inspired me. And I said to myself, whatever religion is, it cultivates this. Now, among the counselors, there was a former Franciscan monk who had married, and a Native American devotee, an atheist, 2 Christians, and a man deeply into New Age spirituality. It was like a spiritual United Nations with a monk, a mystic, an atheist, and a guy who was into crystals before it was cool. And by summer's end, I became passionate about studying religion, and particularly the difference between what I was calling back then traditional religion and genuine religion. Traditional religion called for conformity and focused on holiness, rules, purity, while genuine religion focused on compassion, understanding others, doing good. But over time, I discovered something deeper. Every great world religion, but I was calling many of their manifestations traditional religion, had begun as what I was calling genuine religion. Historian Karen Armstrong has written about a lot of religions. I think my favorite work of hers is The Great Transformation. Because in it, she describes how between the 9th and 7th century BCE, 4 regions of the world, China, India, Israel, and Greece, independently, I shouldn't say Israel, the Middle East and Greece, independently gave rise to new spiritual movements grounded in compassion. Confucius, Buddha, Isaiah, Socrates, they were among many teachers, each who discovered something new about life, that kindness and empathy matter more than rules. In India, the ancient Vedas taught ahimsa, nonviolence and compassion for all living things. It meant that hurting others was really hurting yourself. This is because we're all interconnected, and we all have this divine nature within. And that just naturally calls us to compassion. In Buddhism, compassion, karunya, is the heart of enlightenment. The Buddha taught that wisdom without compassion is incomplete. That spiritual awakening means recognizing the suffering of others as your own. And the bodhisattva ideal was not to leave the world of suffering until all beings are enlightened. And in the writings of the Hebrew prophets, compassion is inseparable from justice. Isaiah, Amos, and Micah proclaimed that right worship of God is meaningless without care for the poor, the stranger, and the oppressed. Across continents, these early teachers came to the same insight. Holiness without compassion becomes cruelty. And Armstrong writes, if your understanding of the divine makes you kinder and more loving, this is good theology. But if it makes you cruel and self-righteous, it is bad theology. She sums up compassion with what we know as the golden rule. Look into your own heart, discover what gives you pain, and refuse under any circumstance to inflict that pain on another. That's compassion. To feel with another person, to suffer with another person, to see through someone else's eyes, to feel their pain as your own, and to act to relieve it. And each faith can be twisted toward control and conformity, even though every one began with compassion. In the Hebrew tradition, holiness became so rigid that a teacher named Jesus called his people back to the heart of their faith. Be compassionate, as God is compassionate. And Jesus didn't spend his days talking about the Trinity or debating original sin. Those obsessions came later. He went about doing good, healing, feeding, forgiving, and welcoming the outcast. That was his theology. Compassion in action, where love is stronger than the law. Now, compassion doesn't mean pity or weakness. Nelson Mandela said, our human compassion binds us to one another, not in pity, but to hope, as beings who have learned how to turn our common suffering into hope. And yet, in our own time, compassion itself is under attack in some areas. I mean, we have reached a truly cynical age where some folks are now saying empathy is dangerous, which is ironic because I've never once heard someone say, you know what caused all our problems? Too much compassion. I mean, some Christian nationalists and hard-right commentators have begun calling empathy a sin, a false gospel of kindness. Even public figures like Elon Musk have called empathy a weakness in human civilization. Yeah, sure, the empathy response can be evoked in ways that's not helpful and can be harmful. But let's be empathy with critical inquiry. Now, theologian Joe Rigney argues that empathy is dangerous because it blurs doctrinal judgment, especially, he says, among women who don't accept their proper place in the family. But I'd say there's something blurring Rigney's judgment. As the popular Jesuit teacher, Father James Martin, reminds us, the lack of empathy is at the heart of our mistreatment of the poor, of migrants, of LGBTQ people, and all those on the margins. When empathy is dismissed, hearts harden. Children are separated from parents. Refugees are treated as statistics. Violence and exclusion are justified as moral purity. And cruelty becomes normal. And it starts sounding like, oh my gosh, are we going back to the 11th century when the Crusades began? I mean, one very interesting thing is that before the Crusades began, there were no images of the crucified Jesus. But I'm going off topic. Karen Armstrong warns that reason without compassion leads into a moral void. That reason without compassion leads into a moral void. And perhaps compassion without reason leads to a different kind of void. And the same moral void shows up in another way today, in the growing campaign to ban books. I mean, there's some folks saying, oh, we can ban books. Maybe we should ban bookmarks that tell you what banned books you can read. It's astonishing. We've gone from, all across our country, books that help young people imagine different lives and perspectives are being pulled from shelves. Books about racial history, about gender identity, about families that look different from our own. Books that invite empathy, understanding. It's striking. The very thing that religion at its best tries to cultivate, curiosity and compassion, is now being labeled dangerous. When we silence stories, we silence the ability to feel with others. A library, like a temple, is a house of stories. Stories that help us understand ourselves and one another. And isn't that what we are here as a congregation as well? A house of stories, so many stories coming together where we can learn from one another and from those who we come into contact with. When we close the doors to such houses, we don't make our children safer. We make them smaller. Genuine religion and genuine education share the same sacred work: to expand the heart, not shrink it. As Unitarian Universalists, we affirm the capacity of human beings to change and grow, and although we make mistakes and can be cruel, we can turn towards compassion and love. And when we find ourselves following rigid ideas or distorted thoughts that harden our hearts, we need not be forever trapped by them. We can grow through spiritual practice. The Dalai Lama puts it simply: if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. And Karen Armstrong reminds us that compassion isn't sentimentality. It's moral courage, the refusal to cause pain. And poet Miller Williams captures this moral courage beautifully. Have compassion for everyone you meet, even if they don't want it. What seems conceit, bad manners, or cynicism is always a sign of things no ears have heard, no eyes have seen. You do not know what wars are going on down there where the spirit meets the bone. And that, friends, is genuine religion. To recognize that beneath every harsh word and every closed heart, there is a hidden wound. And to meet that wound not with condemnation, but with compassion. But let's be clear, compassion is not passive. It doesn't mean we simply let the self-righteous Christian nationalists have their way or remain silent in the face of harm. Compassion means acting from where our heart breaks. If your heart breaks from those trapped in poverty, then compassion may call you to support affordable housing, fair wages, or food security. If your heart breaks for how crime and systemic neglect devastate Black neighborhoods, compassion calls you to work for justice and equity and criminal justice reform. If your heart breaks for people who are undocumented and living in fear of ICE raids, compassion calls you to stand with immigrants and refugees. If your heart breaks for our transgender siblings who face harassment, erasure, and violence, compassion calls you to speak out for their dignity and safety. Compassion doesn't mean turning away from struggle. It means turning toward it, anchored in love, guided by empathy, and shaped by courage. And the best place to start is right here, locally, because compassion that transforms the world begins in the neighborhoods we live in, the schools where our children learn, and the communities where we gather. Big change always starts small. One heart, one act, one relationship at a time. Genuine religion isn't about believing the right doctrines or belonging to the right tribe. It's about learning to love well. Traditional religion asks, are you pure? Do you believe the right thing? Genuine religion asks, are you kind? How will we agree to live? What promises do we want to make one another? So when you meet anger, respond with curiosity. When you meet fear, listen. When you meet cruelty, choose compassion. Because every act of compassion, every open book, every open mind, every open heart moves us a little closer to the world that all truths imagine. A world where all people may know peace. live vibrantly, respond to the call of their hearts. May it be so. Blessed be. Amen.
Visit us at uusg.org.